I did hold up a placard that said, "Protect our veterans."
I listened respectfully to the president. I was there for the entire 99 minutes.
I walked out because we need to understand that this is a 5-alarm fire for our democracy.
Lawmakers there recounting how they spent President Donald Trump's address to the joint session of Congress on Tuesday, an address that saw several different kinds of protests from Democrats, including holding signs wearing specific colors, walking out, and some, like New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, skipping altogether. One of the more criticized moments came early on in Trump's speech when Texas Representative Al Green rose and began shouting at the president in protest. NewsNation's Jackie Koppell spoke with several Democratic lawmakers Wednesday morning to get their reactions, and she joins us now. That outburst from Green led to censure from House members today. We'll get to that in a minute, but you got some immediate reactions from Democratic lawmakers. Let's take a listen.
What he did is certainly not something I would have done.
Behavior breeds behavior. So I'm not surprised with the energy that Trump brings, which is largely negative energy, that's what he gets back from people.
Well, I'd be hard put to criticize anybody's protest when I've torn up the president's manifesto of lies in his last address to the Congress.
Interesting point there from former House Speaker Pelosi. It seems like a mixed bag of what you got from lawmakers. What did you take from what you heard?
Well, there seems to be overall, not everyone, but overall general consensus where if they don't agree with the tactic taken, they do agree with the sentiment, that was really the prevailing theory. And that also, some of the members actually pointed out Joe Wilson several years ago during President Barack Obama's speech, shouting out, "You lie," saying it would be hypocritical for these representatives, particularly the GOP, to focus on a censure in this case when they didn't censure Wilson then.
It seems like there's some confusion or disagreement within the Democratic Party on how to approach opposition to Trump and his agenda. Let's take a listen.
I think it's very hard to upstage the bully pulpit, and we were doing what we could. We could have tried nothing.
I think what we are as Democrats trying to do is shine a spotlight on the failings of this administration.
In public health, we have a way of saying that you're either too early or you're too late. You're never on time. But your goal is to take proactive action before it's too late. And that is what we need to do right now.
So Jackie, what are you hearing from Democrats about the future and their path forward?
So this is really their struggle, right? What is their message? Who is their leader? And how do they get their message out? And I think especially Representative Takano, who you heard there, they're struggling to get their message out. Their communication strategy is a real struggle. And so they don't really know what works. And they're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place with Tuesday night, right? If they didn't do anything, a large portion of their base would have expressed enormous frustration and anger if they had stayed quiet and totally silent. However, on the flip side, you're seeing there's a fair amount of criticism for having spoken out, protested, worn a shirt, or in the case of Representative Green, shouting at the president regarding Medicaid. So it's a really tough time for Democrats, and Donald Trump did a good job of pointing out his guests and all of the kid with brain cancer and surviving that and deputizing him. It really put Democrats in a sticky situation.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Jackie Koppell, thanks so much for your help.
By its adoption of House Resolution 189, the House has resolved that Representative Al Green be censured, that Representative Al Green forthwith present himself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure, and that Representative Al Green be censured with public reading of this resolution by the Speaker.
Democratic Congressman Al Green was censured today by members of the U.S. House after an outburst during President Trump's speech before a joint session of Congress. Shortly after the vote, Green spoke exclusively to NewsNation on the censure and why he stood up to President Trump.
I knew what I was doing. It was peaceful protest. When you engage in peaceful protest, you have to be disruptive. You've got to get in the way. But it doesn't mean that you are going to agree with the consequences because you know that what you're doing is righteous. This is a righteous cause, standing up for people who may lose their health insurance.
10 Democrats joined Republicans on the censure vote, which says Green's behavior was a breach of proper conduct. Green shouted and shook his cane at the president during the Tuesday evening speech and was eventually removed from the room by the sergeant at arms. Joining us to discuss this and more, Cate Martel, national political reporter and author of the 1230 Report. Cate, this is not the first outburst during a joint session of Congress. NewsNation Capitol Hill correspondent Joe Khalil caught up with Representative Jasmine Crockett after the censure vote.
We know that Marjorie is never in decorum. We know that Marjorie was not warned once. We know that the rules are clear that you're not allowed to wear hats at all. We know that she consistently wears a MAGA hat in every single State of the Union. We know that we've always seen these ridiculous outbursts from Marjorie, no matter if it's in the State of the Union or anything else.
Crockett there talking about Georgia Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. There was also in 2009 that famous "You Lie" incident when President Obama was giving a speech. Greene has actually heckled Biden multiple times when he was president. Those are Republicans. So why is the censure necessary now, and what actual impact does the censure have?
Well, first, Drew, a censure doesn't have much of an impact. It is a formal way to reprimand a House member, but it doesn't have any real consequences or implications. It's more just having a mark on your record. And, Republicans chose to censure him, including 10 Republicans, as you mentioned, because this was a breach of House protocol. Speaker Mike Johnson argued that repeatedly he told Congressman Greene to sit down. He would not do so, and that was the warning that he gave him before he did kick him off the House floor. But overall, we're seeing a power struggle between Republicans and Democrats, and this was just a continuation and a step forward, and not particularly surprising either way.
What do you make of those 10 Democrats that voted with Republicans?
Yeah, it's interesting because House Democratic leadership had warned Democrats not to have a big disruption. They were hoping not to have any interruptions, but to have a quiet protest among members. So what I see from these 10 Democrats that did opt to vote to censure him is that we're just seeing Democrats are not quite on the same page. We saw some Democrats step up and walk out during the speech. We obviously saw Green's protest, and we also saw some Democrats skip out. And overall, we're not seeing some unified message, and that's why I think we're seeing some Democrats agreeing that that was not the way forward. They're worried in 2026 on the campaign trail, some of these clips will come back to haunt them.
President Trump is pushing ahead with his efforts to shut down the Department of Education. There's been reports that he could sign an executive order today aimed at dismantling the department. The Department of Education was created by Congress. You would think you need Congress to shut it down. That means you need Democratic votes, which is not going to happen. So what can Trump actually do here through executive order?
Well, that's the magic question, Drew, and I assume we will have some legal challenges to whatever the president tries to do. Now, what we're hearing is that President Trump is going to potentially issue an executive order to direct his education secretary, Linda McMahon, to dismantle as much as she can legally. They can gut certain parts of it, but as you mentioned, it requires 60 votes in the Senate to formally shut down the department. They obviously don't have that. Republicans only have 53 votes in the majority. So we can see them, have major layoffs and try to dismantle individual programs, but overall, they're not going to be able to dismantle the actual department. And even what they do, I absolutely expect legal challenges and may have this be a major legal battle that will carry out for months to come.
And the IRS, VA, NOAA also in the crosshairs. Quickly before I let you go, is this a similar situation to what we're seeing with the Department of Education, where Trump can try to do this through executive action, but ultimately it would need an act of Congress and is likely to get caught up in the courts?
Yes. Now, we have seen mass layoffs happen at NOAA. We're seeing at the IRS. We're seeing this at the VA. This is just an effort for the Trump administration to try to gut these programs as much as they can, ones that they don't think are, politically helpful for them. But, they are able to do this through an executive order to try to have mass layoffs. And we are seeing these agencies comply with this order without actually dismantling some of these programs. And that's where you're seeing the legal pushback, Drew.
All right, Cate Martel, we'll leave it at that. Thank you. A bomb threat forced the evacuation of Barnard College last night after mass protesters stormed the campus for a second week in a row. NewsNation's Laura Ingle has the latest as NYPD officers in riot gear descended on the scene.
Drew, all quiet today for now, and yesterday it was a scene that we have had repeated over the last year, with chants of protesters saying "Free Palestine" over and over again. It all happened right here behind me. We're going to push in and show you. This is the Milstein Center. There's a library in there, and that is where protesters did a sit-in, and they wouldn't leave. This all started when students occupied that center library, and what they're looking for here is to have Barnard College reverse the expulsions of 2 students who were punished for interrupting a History of Modern Israel class in January, while also protesting the expulsion of student activists and demanding the school reinstate them. These protesters say the expulsions were a response to their support of Palestinian rights, and then things escalated when a bomb threat was called in and police evacuated the library. That threat was later found out to be a hoax, but the protests continued, and that's when police started arresting people, 9 protesters in all who refused to leave the building. Barnard's president condemned the protest, saying it endangered students and staff. She said that police had no choice but to step in to ensure safety at that point. And students are firmly standing by their cause, saying this is about more than just the expulsions. They are fighting back against what they say as a crackdown on student activism. They're also raising concerns about pressure from political leaders, including President Trump, who has threatened to pull funding from universities that allow these protests to continue. And while the campus is calm today and classes have resumed, students say they will keep protesting until their demands are met. This was the 3rd protest since the new year here at Barnard College, and we are hearing rumblings that there could be more this week. Drew?
NewsNation's Laura Engel, thank you. The Black Lives Matter Plaza near the White House in Washington, D.C. may be no more. That's according to a statement issued by Mayor Muriel Bowser, suggesting the city will paint over it. The statement comes after Georgia Republican Congressman Andrew Clyde introduced a bill to withhold funds from D.C. if the plaza is not renamed Liberty Plaza. Bowser said in the statement, the mural inspired millions of people and helped our city through a very painful period, but now we can't afford to be distracted by meaningless congressional interference. The bill comes after other legislation has been introduced in Congress to repeal D.C.'s autonomous government known as Home Rule. City officials for decades have fought to obtain D.C.'s statehood to secure voting representation in Congress. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.